Hey guys, how's it going? I'm back here with another video, and today I decided to bring this video where I'm going to be showing to you guys how to build your first NextJS project, while keeping in mind that I'm using the version 13th of NextJS. So I will introduce everything from creating your first project while actually utilizing many of its important features in a very beginner-friendly way. My plan is to later on make an intermediate project and finally an advanced project, which will probably be part of a series. Now, the project we're going to be building as a beginner is really simple, but also demonstrates a lot of the cool key features, especially with this new version. So all I'm building over here is I'm connecting to 3 different APIs, which sounds insane, but it isn't that complicated. You'll see why. And all we want on this website is a simple website over here where you type your name. In my case, my name is Pedro, so I'm going to put the name Pedro like this, and I'm going to click on submit, and it will load the data and redirect us to a page where it shows our predicted age, our predicted gender, and our predicted nationality. Now, all this information for the prediction, I'm getting it from 3 different APIs that all do kind of the same thing. And I'm going to show you guys exactly how to build this. If you want to check out the code, it will all be in the description. As always, my videos are more focused on the functionality, so keep that in mind, and let's get to it. Before we get into the video, I would like to talk a little bit about today's sponsor, NordPass. In today's digital landscape, password security is extremely important, especially because no matter what, we have to have a password. It doesn't matter if it's for a part of our life where we're working with our own jobs, or if we're talking about something like an entertainment website. Spending time gathering your thoughts and trying to remember passwords definitely impacts your productivity. And it's a challenge that everyone in the business space faces. But NordPass Business actually has a solution for you. NordPass Business is more than just a password manager. It is also a productivity booster because it securely stores all of your important passwords, allowing for instant access into your online accounts with quick and safe payment processing and an early data breaching detection built into it. So imagine you live in a world where you basically don't have to worry about resetting passwords or waiting to have access to your own personal accounts. NordPass will handle all of that for you, and not only that, but also secure all of your passwords into an encrypted vault. So that means that if you have a team, you're working with a business, you can basically share credentials, anything related to payment information, or any notes regarding whatever your business is for, without having to worry about it being securely stored in a safe space. And if you're a large business, you can save up to $1 million in IT help desk staffing costs because you don't have to have an employee that will manually reset your employees' passwords and handle that manually. NordPass will do everything for you. Not to mention that it allows you to have full transparency over everything that you're storing and who gets what access and what activity. So that means that even if an employee that you're working with actually leaves the team, you can revoke their access really simply. In my opinion, NordPass Business makes collaboration way simpler and more efficient. It's a platform meant to keep your company's digital wealth managed and safe. And guess what? If you want to try it out, you can check out my link in the description and you'll get a 3-month free trial. Just go to nordpass.com/PedroTech and use the promo code PedroTech to be able to access everything. Again, that's nordpass.com/PedroTech. And remember, NordPass Business doesn't just enhance your online security, but it also helps to boost your own productivity. Now, with that in mind, thank you again, NordPass, for sponsoring this video, and let's get into the tutorial. Okay, everyone, so let's get into the actual tutorial. So I opened up over here a pretty empty project inside of VS Code. I just created a folder called NextJS Proj, as you can see over here, and I opened it on VS Code. Now, what I need to do is I need to run create next app, which is a command I can run by just putting npx create next app, just like this. Now this will, similar to create React app, create a Next.js application, but it will ask you a couple questions before it can do so. So the first thing is, what is my project name? Well, I'm gonna run my project entirely from inside the folder I'm currently inside of already. So I'm just gonna put a dot and it will create everything inside of where I currently am. Then it's gonna ask, would you like to use TypeScript? I'm gonna go by default with all of the options that Next recommends. So what I mean default is when it asks a question like this, either yes or no, I'm going to go with the one that by default is already selected. And the reason for that is because that's how I code NextJS. We're going to be using TypeScript. We're going to be using Tailwind CSS. That's the tech stack that I would recommend using when creating a Next application. So I'm going to press enter for this, and then enter for ESLint as well, although we won't probably see anything of that. Yes for Tailwind, and yes, and no. So as we pressed enter on all of them, it will start creating the files, as you can see over here. But I'll be back in a second when it's finished installing all of the dependencies and everything required for our project. Okay, as you can see, it finished installing all of the dependencies necessary. So I already have my project over here already created. If I want to start my project and actually see it running over here in the localhost 3000, all I have to do is run yarn dev. So similar to yarn start if you're using create React app, but with this case, the dev is just so we can run the dev version of our project. And if I run by the default boilerplate code that comes with the create next app, you'll see that this is the website as of right now. It's a bunch of boilerplate stuff related to Next.js, which we will immediately delete. So I'm going to come over here and we're going to open up our source folder and straight up just delete everything inside of our page component over here. But don't worry, I'm going to explain what each of these files mean. So as I'm deleting this, I'm going to explain that Next.js is in itself a little bit different from normal React used with Create React app, because as I've mentioned in previous videos, a lot of people get confused. They think that Next.js is an alternative to React, but no, Next.js uses React. React is one of the main parts of Next.js. Next.js is more of an alternative to Create React app or something like Vite. It's the way in which you use React to produce your application. So with Next.js, a lot of its focus is with the idea of allowing server-side rendering. And I'm not going to go into details about what server-side rendering is and how it's done specifically with Next.js. We're going to be dealing with it, but I'm not going to go into the more abstract and more meaningful part of it, because I already have 2 or 3 videos talking about this. And this is more of a functionality-based video with some theory on it as well. So what I have over here is just the source folder of our application, right? And this is where all of our app will contain. You see that there's another folder called app, and inside of it, there's a bunch of files. Now, the page file over here is basically the home root of our application. So if you go into this URL over here and you just don't put anything extra, you'll see that it goes into this page. Now with Next.js, navigation is way simpler than with other methods in my opinion, because if I wanted to create another route over here, all I would have to do is just create a folder. For example, imagine I want to create a route called name, and I were to create a folder called name, and inside of here I put a component called page.tsx. Now I automatically have like an actual URL and route in my application called name. You'll see that I can call this whatever I want. I'll call it page, and I could just write, I don't know, like name inside of here. And whenever I navigate into a route called name, we will render whatever this component page.tsx over here is rendering. So it is a bit different, right? Because if I come over here and I go to /name, you'll see that component is being rendered. It's really simple. Every time you want to create a new route, you don't have to deal with stuff like React Router DOM or anything like that, because it's all built in. You just create a folder with the name of the route you want to create, and then inside of it, you create a file called page.tsx. Now, why am I saying this? Well, because we have this page.tsx over here, which is the root route of our application. And inside of here, we're going to do some cool things that you will see. Like I said, I don't show the CSS, and in this case, I won't be showing the Tailwind CSS in the video. And the reason for that is always because it will take on too much time of the video to be caring about styling. You guys probably won't even care about the styles of the video. So I'm gonna add the elements and the functionality, and at the end, I'll add the styles so you guys can see how it looks with everything put on together. Now, what I want to create over here is a very simple kind of form type thing inside of my application. I want to create first this div, which will be the root of everything, then another div, which will encompass our form and also the section in our website which will say like enter your name just as a title page. If you recall in the beginning of the video, it will make a lot more sense. But we're going to put an h1 tag here saying enter your name. Then over here at the bottom, we're going to start putting our form, which will be used for us to be able to write on the actual input and then send it to our API. So in our form over here, we're going to have just a single input, which is going to be of type text, right? So type text and a placeholder called type your name, something like this. Now at the bottom over here, we're going to add a button so that when you type the name, you click on the button, it will search for the predictions for the specific name. We're going to click predict data, and we're going to put a type over here of type submit, because when you click on this button, it's going to submit the form. Now this thing over here is pretty much okay, because if we go over here, we'll see that if we go to our route, we have this little text, the input, and the button. But it obviously doesn't do anything right now, but we're going to add the functionality just in a bit. So what we want to do is we want to add the ability to grab whatever you're typing on this input and use it in some way inside of our application. So to do that, obviously we have to use a hook called the useState hook. Now this is starting off one of the most important things or differences with NextJS. If I try to use this hook, right, I'm going to import useState over here. And I try to create a state called input value and set input val and then equal to useState, and it will be a string. This over here doesn't actually work. Now if I come over here, you'll see it will give us an error. And the reason why it's giving us an error is because, especially with the new version of React 18 and all of the changes that comes with NextJS 13, we have a distinction between what is known as a server component and a client component. The easiest way to differentiate that for a beginner, in my opinion, is the following. Inside of a client component, you're going to use it purely for interactive content or using like pre-built React hooks. So when you have a client component, you're using stuff like the React hooks, like useState, useEffect, and useContext. And you're also using stuff like onClick, onChange, anything that is related to the browser. That's what exists inside of a client component. Now, what is used in a server component is usually used to fetch data or keep sensitive information because, like I said, NextJS provides us with the ability of rendering our components in the server, and the server components are the ones that are going to do that. So the client, the browser, won't have access to that, but it will have access to the data that is achieved or acquired inside of our server component. Since this is a beginner's tutorial, you are completely fine to not understand completely the distinction, so don't feel overwhelmed, don't worry, because with time and as we practice, this will become more clear to you. Using a server component for fetching data is also good because it has faster page load. It makes your JavaScript bundle smaller because, again, like I said, it's all in the server and not in the client. And it's good for that kind of stuff, like I said, fetching data and keeping sensitive information. Now, by default, all components in NextJS inside of the app folder over here are server components. So that's why it's giving us an error. We actually have to transform this into a client component to be able to use this useState hook over here. Now to do that, we just come over here at the top and we do something a little bit weird, but you'll get used to it, which is writing this string called useClient and saving it. Having this at the top will turn any server component into a client component. As you can see over here, it's not giving us the error anymore, which means it is working. Now, what we want to do, now that we got that out of the way and set up, is we want to add an onChange to the input. Now that's simple. We're just going to come over here and pass an onChange and say that whenever there's a change in our event, we're going to set the input val to be equal to the event.target.value, just like this. Now we're also going to set the value of our input to input val, just like this. And for now, that should be pretty much it. So now that we got the actual input value, what we want to do is we want to be able to submit this information somewhere, right? We want to send it to our API. Now, the way we're going to do this is I'm going to create over here a function called handle submit, which will be called whenever whenever you click on that button. For now, we'll just keep it empty, but I'm going to put it right over on the end of the form. We're going to actually give it an onSubmit and pass in the handle submit function. Now this over here will take in an event, which, by the way, if you are not familiar with TypeScript, you can ignore some of the stuff I'm going to do. But if you've ever worked with TypeScript, you have to give the types, right? And over here, we have an event variable that needs a type. And the type for this will be form event, just like this. So you don't have to worry too much about this. It's just describing what the type of this event is. Then what I want to do is I want to prevent default, because if you recall, when you submit a form or you click on a button to submit a form, it will refresh the page and not actually deal with the stuff without refreshing the page, right? In React, we have to prevent default, or else it will restart your component and refresh the URL. So now that we have this over here set up, what do we do? Because remember when I said in client components, you usually don't fetch the data, you fetch it on the server component, but we make this one into a client component. So how are we going to fetch the data? Well, we're going to do it by fetching it on a server component. And the way I like to do this is I'm actually going to create a new route in our application. I'm actually going to recycle this folder I used over here, and we'll call this route prediction. Now, you'll see that if I were to come over here into the /prediction route over here, you'll see that it's just replaced, that just works, but it shows in the information for a name that we created previously. But actually, I want to use a route that is dynamic. So if you've ever worked with parameters and routes, what I mean by this is whenever you go into the localhost 3000 /prediction and you go / some sort of name like Kyle or Jack or something like that, what it's going to do is when you go in here, it's supposed to, obviously right now it's saying this page cannot be found because we haven't set this up, but it should actually grab this name over here and use it in the code. So the reason why we're doing this is when we come over here into our page.tsx inside of our handle.submit, we're going to push or redirect our page into a route equal to the prediction / whatever name we use, and then use this name in our other component to be able to fetch the data. If that sounds confusing right now, don't worry, you will understand. So like I said, we want to create a dynamic route. So to create another, that functionality of making it dynamic, we're going to come inside of the prediction folder and create a folder like this. It's going to be called name, because that's the name of the variable or the param that we want to pass. And then I'm going to put this page inside of here. And yes, I'm going to update the imports, and although there's no imports, and inside of this name thing over here, for now, if we want to get the parameter, which like I said is the value of the name over here, or this value over here, we can actually come over here and just destructure the params, which for now I'll just give a type of any, but I'll obviously give a type later on, and display params.name, which we know this works because the name is the name of the folder, right? We made this folder equal to square brackets name. So if you follow this syntax, you'll see that no matter what I type over here after prediction, it's now being used in the code because this is the param of the prediction route. So that's what I'm talking about. Params are basically variables that you can pass, or arguments that you can pass to a URL to be able to use them later on. And over here, we have this URL route called prediction with a param variable called name. And we grab it by using the params variable over here. And we access the name because it's the actual name of the param. I guess you guys understood this, right? So now that we have that out of the way, how are we going to actually redirect ourselves to this page over here when we click the submit button? Well, to do that, we can use the use router hook from NextJS. So over here, I'm going to import from next/navigation. So it's a navigation part of NextJS. They have something called the use router, just like this. And what I want to do is I want to destructure this use router by saying const equals to use router just like this. And I want to destructure the function push. Now this function allows us to redirect ourselves to another route by just saying push and then putting the name of the route over here. Now where we want to go is we want to go to the prediction route slash, and then we want to go to whatever value this input has at the moment. So we just have to put this input val variable inside of this so that we go to that specific route. Since I use backticks, we can actually use the string template notation and pass in over here input value just like this. Now we're going to be going to whatever route is set up depending on this input's value. So let's test that out. I'm going to come over here into the original page and I'm going to write Pedro. Oh, I just realized the text is white. So I'm just going to come into our input and add a class name. And this is the only CSS I'm going to write. I'm going to write text black. Which obviously this is Tailwind CSS, but you see the colors changed to black. I'm gonna click then on predict data, and what it should do is redirect us to the predictions/Pedro page, which is exactly what happens. So it means it's working, right? Now we set up navigating and redirecting, but we haven't set up fetching the data or anything related to that. But first, what we have to do is we have to set up the correct type for our params variable over here. Now, if you're familiar with TypeScript again, it's really simple. We're just going to create an interface called params, and its properties will be, it will have an object called params, and for us, we just need a string called name to be passed to this component so that we can get the name from this thing over here. So I'm just going to pass this, and now we have the correct type. So what do we want to do now? Well, in order to fetch data, and I'll show you guys the API right now. So these are the three APIs we're going to be fetching data from. I think they're owned by the same group, but they all do similar things, but with different intentions. For example, we have the genderize API where you just fetch data from this URL, you put a name of a person over here, and it will predict their gender, right? Same thing with nationalize, where it gives you kind of a country code for which country they think this person is most likely part of or born in. And this one is for age. And I want to combine all three of them inside of our application. So the way we're going to fetch data, because if you remember, this is now a server component. So how exactly would we fetch data? Well, what we can do is we can first create the functions that are going to fetch that data. So I'm going to come over here at the top, and I'm going to create a function called a get or fetch. I'm going to call get predicted age. Let's start with age. And obviously this will fetch some data, so it has to be asynchronous. And we need the name of the person is going to fetch the data for, right? So I'm going to put name equals string as an argument. We're going to pass this data down later on. Now I want to fetch the data by saying const res equals to await fetch, and then pass in that URL. So we're going to come back over here and grab this URL, paste it directly over here as a string. And obviously we have to change the name equals to Pedro to be name equals to name, because we're going to customize what we fetched the data for. Then we're going to return res.json. Now, this is basically it. This function is just fetching the data and returning the promise with the data. We're going to do the same thing for the other two. So we're going to do get predicted gender and get predicted country. Just like this. All of them will be exactly the same, but the difference is obviously we need the correct URLs. So the only difference are these ones over here. Now we're going to have to call these functions inside of our actual component. But you might be questioning, how are we going to do this? Because there are asynchronous components, but we can't, like, this is not asynchronous. Well, with server components, you can actually make them async. I could come over here and make this an asynchronous function, and this would work perfectly, which is crazy, right? With the new versions of React 18 and X13, this is the way you would go about it. In a server component, you would make it into an async component, which would then have these functions getting the data we need for this specific component. Then I would get their data by saying const age data, for example, equal to get predicted data, pass in the name, right, as an argument. So I'm going to say params.name, and we're going to get that data, that promise over here. So this is a promise. So it's not the actual data yet. We're going to resolve that in a second. We're going to do the same thing for the other two. So we're going to do gender data and country data. And then this would be get gender data. Did I not change the name of the, yeah. Oh yeah, it's get predicted gender and get predicted country, just like this. Now, what we do is we need to resolve all of them. And if we have multiple API fetches in the same component, a way we can do this is we can just destructure it by using an array and saying await promise.all. So we're resolving more than one promise at once. We're resolving the age data one, the gender data one, and the country data one. So that means that this will return an array in order with the correct data. So if I want to get the correct age, I can just get age, gender, and country, just like this. And this will actually be the data that we are fetching. Now, I know this notation might look a little bit weird, but if you understood the skeleton of it, it's just you fetch the data up here with one function. It doesn't have to be 3 functions. This is just because we're using 3 different APIs in the same component. But you make the request, then you get that data over here. You pass in that data into a promise.all if you have multiple, but if you don't have multiple, you just say async await, obviously, and you get the data back over here. Now that we have that, we can actually use that data. I'm going to create a little skeleton of a project over here so that we can display that data. But again, I'm not displaying the CSS yet. I'm just going to add it at the end of the video. But we're adding a div over here, then another div. And inside of this second div, we're going to actually add the distinction between the classes, or the information. So I'm going to add a div for personal info over here. This is just a kind of like a title about the person, or a title about, the person you're searching for. And then a div for the age, which will just contain a text called age. And then we're going to display the age like this. Now, how do I know I can just say age.age? Well, this over here, this variable age should represent whatever we get back, whatever object we get back from an API request on the API. This is the age API, right? And when you request back the data, it should return an object just like this. So this over here should equal this object depending on who you put the name of. And you can see that this object contains a property of count. So if you're interested, you can see how many people with this name, which is cool. They're in the name you search for, which makes sense, but also the age. So if I were to say age.age over here, I'm accessing the age value, this value over here, inside of the age API response. I hope that makes sense. Then I'm going to do the same thing for gender and the same thing for country. But they're a little bit different. You have to look at the API in order to know what you're actually returning. I know that gender is just gender.gender, because if we check again here, it has the object has a property called gender, which is what we need. But the country one is a little bit different. It has a property called country, which is an array of multiple countries this person might be part of, right? Because they can't predict their actual, obviously the other ones too, they can't predict, but for some reason for country, this is how it looks. And we just want to get the highest prediction. So that would be the first element in this array, and we want to get the country ID of it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say for the country, we want to get the country, and then we're getting the first element, so the highest probability country, dot country ID. Now you might be wondering, why am I putting question marks? Well, because we haven't defined what is the return type or what exactly is it being returned from this API request. So if we wanted to, we could create an interface specifying that the API will always return an object looking like this or like this, whatever. But we don't want to do that right now because it's just a simple API. It would be pointless for the video. So I'm putting question marks because they guarantee to me that they won't be trying to access something that doesn't exist. And I forgot to put country over here. This should probably work. But when we put a question mark, if you've never heard of it, basically, if gender is null, it won't try to access the gender key inside of this object because it will know that this is null, so it won't do that. So this is basically why I'm putting a question mark over here. We should see that it should be working, right? So if I refresh over here with a prediction Pedro, it made the API request automatically by default without using use effects or anything like that. It's all by default, and the information is being displayed over here, which means it's pretty much working completely. All I have to do is add all of the Tailwind CSS that I said in the beginning I wrote, and I'll be back in a second. And as you can see, I just added all of the Tailwind CSS. Now, if you're not a fan of Tailwind, you don't have to use Tailwind with NextJS. I do enjoy it sometimes. I've made videos on it in the past. I think it's way quicker to code, but I added all of this simple Tailwind class names over here, which if you want to copy, it's all in the description. It made it look like this, which is not ugly, but also not good. But let's see how the website is working. If I come over here and I type the name Cody, you'll see that if I submit, it should redirect me to a prediction page with the URL Cody, and the personal info should have the correct predicted information. Now, obviously, this website is useless because, like, obviously, there's a bunch of Codys around the world without this specific age, without this specific gender. I think that the gender and the nationality are more useful because you can know where a name is more commonly from or which gender they're more commonly used as. But the age is crazy because I know Codys. I don't know any Cody that is 40, but I know Codys that are not 40. You know what I mean? And there's names like Andrea. I know Andrea is a very commonly female name in a lot of places around the world, which is crazy because the only place I know that it's not a female name and it can be used as a male name is Italy. But here it says that the nationality is Italy, but it's predicting female. Maybe they used it for both genders over there or for multiple genders over there. But yeah, this is what I'm saying. It's a stupid website, but it serves to teach you the basics of NextJS, which is my hope with this video. To recap what we've learned how to set up a NextJS application by using create next app. We've learned the basic folder structure of a Next application and how to set up routes and a little bit of routing. Like we talked about dynamic routes and stuff like that. We've also talked about the Next navigation hook, which isn't really that important, but you've seen a little bit of the taste of it, as you can see over here. We've also talked about difference between client and server components, right? And how to transform a component into a client component, and also how to fetch data asynchronously in the server component by making the component be asynchronous itself. Now, this seems like a lot because it is. So don't feel overwhelmed as a beginner, especially if you've never coded in React before, which I assume some of you might have not, because like I said before, you don't have to know React before learning NextJS because NextJS is also React. So let me know in the description if you guys are interested in me making the intermediate project. Obviously with the intermediate project, I'm not going to go over every single detail of beginner stuff. I'm going to be focusing more on more advanced stuff. Again, thank you NordPass for sponsoring this video. If you guys want to check them out, it will help me so much because they are the people who help support the channel. And by you guys checking out their amazing product, it helps us as well. So please go check them out in the description. And yeah, that's basically it. I really hope you guys enjoyed it, and I see you guys next time.